The soft melody of the orchestra drifted across the grand ballroom, mingling with the soft murmur of refined conversations and the gentle clinking of crystal glasses. It was a splendid evening hosted by Coleman Reeves, a man whose stature in financial and civic circles commanded respect. Guests milled about in tailored suits and elegant gowns, including prominent bankers, respected physicians, distinguished lawyers, and even a local judge. Among the crowd, Sally smiled warmly as Coleman greeted her with genuine hospitality, expressing his gratitude for her presence. Yet beneath the glittering surface of the gathering, subtle tensions flickered like shadows. Alex approached Coleman with an edge of urgency in his voice, asking if any news had arrived regarding their pending delivery. Coleman immediately lowered his own tone, cautioning Alex against raising his voice like a common street hoodlum, reminding him of the esteemed company surrounding them. Alex confessed his anxiety about the delayed shipment, but Coleman reassured him with steady confidence, suggesting he refresh his drink while Coleman tended to his younger son, Danny. In a quiet corner away from the bustling crowd, Danny was immersed in a book. Coleman stepped up beside him, observing that Danny must have figured out the mystery long before reaching the final chapter. Coleman encouraged his son to set the book aside and join the festivities, but Danny quietly admitted he felt far more comfortable tucked away with his reading. Coleman reminded him that his time for quiet reading would soon be limited once he relocated to Phoenix to manage the family enterprise. Danny hesitated, clearly conflicted about the proposed move to Arizona. He questioned why his father needed him to manage a large industrial laundry facility, pointing out that someone was already running it successfully. Coleman explained patiently that the operation supplied half the linen for the entire state of Arizona, and he required family at the helm, someone he could trust implicitly. When Danny asked how trust could ever be an issue between a father and son, a butler stepped forward to announce an incoming phone call from Andre. Coleman noted with a gentle smile that the climate in Arizona would also benefit Danny's asthma before stepping away to answer the telephone. On the line, Andre reported from the Bahamas, exchanging pleasantries about the tropical weather before moving to the heart of the matter. Coleman inquired about the progress of the incoming shipment. Andre confirmed that everything was moving smoothly according to schedule, bringing visible relief to Coleman, who assured Andre that his boy would be waiting at the designated landing spot. As Coleman concluded the call, his elder son, Vince, approached to ask if that was the long-awaited update. Coleman confirmed it was indeed Andre, then turned to Danny, suggesting he take over Vince's friendly card game and keep Joanna company. Vince chuckled playfully, warning his younger brother not to wear her out, before turning to his father to discuss the logistics. Coleman confirmed that the shipment was scheduled to arrive that very day. Out at a secluded airstrip, the sound of a small aircraft engine echoed against the hills. Orange smoke flares billowed across the grass to mark the landing strip. The pilot, Sam Fields, brought the plane down through the shifting winds, landing near two men who waited anxiously near a vehicle. Sam stepped out of the cockpit, demanding his agreed cash payment upon delivery. However, before any transaction could occur, an armed figure stepped out from the treeline, brandishing a weapon and demanding the briefcase. The confrontation escalated rapidly, resulting in chaos as the assailant seized the money and fled, leaving the scene in disarray. Shortly thereafter, news of a tragic accident at the airfield reached the authorities. Barnaby Jones, a seasoned private investigator, was retained by Mrs. Fields to look into the circumstances surrounding her husband's death. The official sheriff's report claimed that Sam Fields had accidentally backed into his own propeller after making an emergency landing, but Mrs. Fields remained deeply skeptical. She explained to Barnaby that Sam had been flying since he was 16 years old and was far too experienced to make such a fatal error. Furthermore, she disclosed that Sam was supposed to have $5,000 in cash on his person, money that had vanished completely from the scene. She revealed that over the past few months, Sam had been hired for secret flights to the Bahamas by way of Mexico, and this had been his third trip. Desperate to keep his struggling aviation business afloat, Sam had reluctantly taken the lucrative job. Although she did not know who had hired him, she recalled that shortly before his first trip, a mechanic named Nat Lewis had called Sam to meet for a drink at a local establishment called the Flightline Club. Barnaby, accompanied by his capable younger associate Jedediah Jones, visited the airfield to inspect the aircraft. Jedediah, a skilled pilot who had served in Vietnam, carefully examined the plane alongside Nat Lewis, who claimed the engine might have simply overheated or leaked oil. Jedediah pointed out that the engine was completely dry and showed no signs of mechanical failure. While searching the surrounding grass, Barnaby discovered 2 spent smoke flares, suggesting that someone on the ground had deliberately signaled the pilot to guide his landing. Meanwhile, behind closed doors at the headquarters of Capricorn Investment Corporation, Coleman Reeves gathered his inner circle. Vince, Alex, and Fred Bender stood around the conference table as Coleman expressed his profound anger over the stolen delivery. A sum of $460,000 had been hijacked, money that Coleman was personally responsible for laundering and returning to his powerful associates. Vince tried to downplay the loss, but Coleman emphasized that maintaining trust was paramount. When Danny entered the room dressed in stylish new attire, Coleman paused the meeting. Danny offered to postpone his trip to Phoenix to support the family during this crisis, emphasizing that family should stick together. Coleman acknowledged his son's gesture, promising they would discuss it later. After Danny left, Coleman announced that Andre had arranged a secondary shipment of $500,000, which would enter through Mexico late that night and arrive at an abandoned ranch in the North Valley. Following up on information provided by Mrs. Fields, Jedediah visited the Flightline Club and struck up a conversation with Marianne, a perceptive waitress who frequented the establishment. Through their light-hearted banter, Jedediah learned that Marianne's companion was connected to Vince Reeves, the son of Coleman Reeves. The investigation quickly began to center upon the Reeves family and their potential ties to international money laundering. That night at the secluded North Valley Ranch, a replacement pilot named Jim Cave arrived with the money transfer. However, Vince Reeves had secretly altered the plan, instructing Jim to hand the briefcase directly to Fred Bender. As Jim prepared to complete the exchange, an intruder wearing a ski mask and wielding a sawed-off shotgun emerged from the darkness. The masked figure forced Fred to drop his weapon and hand over the briefcase before fleeing into the surrounding woods. Fred gave chase, followed closely by Vince, who had been lurking nearby. Moments later, a gunshot shattered the nightly silence. The following morning, Lieutenant Biddle of the local police department notified Barnaby that Vince Reeves had been found dead in the woods, killed by a single gunshot to the chest. Barnaby immediately recognized that Vince's murder was directly linked to the stolen illicit funds and the death of Sam Fields. He set out to locate Fred Bender, who had vanished completely following the shooting. Meanwhile, Danny Reeves underwent a striking personal transformation. Removing his heavy eyeglasses in favor of contact lenses, he approached Joanna Morgan to offer his comfort and support during her time of grief. Danny confessed his long-standing affection for her, admitting that he had admired her from the moment Vince first introduced her to the family. Joanna expressed appreciation for his kindness, but suggested they take things slowly. Suddenly, the telephone rang. Danny answered it, to hear the voice of Fred Bender on the line. Fred revealed that he had identified the getaway vehicle Danny used at the ranch, having tracked the rental agreement back to him. Recognizing that Danny was the masked figure who had stolen the money and caused Vince's tragic death, Fred demanded $100,000 in cash in exchange for his silence, instructing Danny to meet him at an abandoned bottling plant on Commerce and 3rd Street at noon. Danny secured the requested sum and arrived at the designated bottling plant, walking through the rear alley door into the cavernous, shadowy building. Fred Bender stepped out from the shadows with a weapon drawn, demanding the briefcase. Danny handed over the money, but before Fred could depart, Coleman Reeves and his security personnel stepped into the room, having tracked Fred down earlier. A tense confrontation unfolded as Coleman confronted his younger son. Deeply shaken, Coleman asked Danny why he would ever commit such a betrayal against his own family. Danny emotionally confessed that all his life he had felt overshadowed by Vince, desiring only his father's respect and validation. He explained that he never intended for anyone to get hurt, He had planned to return the money later to prove his own cleverness and resourcefulness to his father. He insisted that Vince's death in the dark woods had been a terrible, tragic accident. Gazing at his son with a mixture of sorrow and regret, Coleman admitted that perhaps he had failed to show Danny the equal affection and respect he deserved. Seizing upon his father's remorse, Danny pleaded for a second chance to prove his loyalty, offering to eliminate Barnaby Jones, who was rapidly closing in on their operations. Moments later, Barnaby Jones entered the bottling plant alone, having received a tip regarding Fred Bender's whereabouts. Danny drew his weapon on Barnaby, believing he had the upper hand. However, Barnaby remained completely composed, explaining that he had already informed Lieutenant Biddle of the location and that law enforcement officers had fully surrounded the perimeter of the building. Lieutenant Biddle and his officers swept into the facility, taking Coleman Reeves, Danny Reeves, and their associates into custody without further incident. As the suspects were led away, Coleman remarked bitterly that young people no longer appreciated the sacrifices made by their elders. Outside the building, under the bright morning sun, Jedediah joined Barnaby, playfully teasing his mentor about taking unnecessary risks. Barnaby smiled warmly, dismissing the concern with light-hearted humor, and invited his younger partner to join him for a cold glass of milk to celebrate the successful conclusion of the case.